this piano sonata in B minor.
nice to have more, but I think that's the best place for us. So this is just such a huge thing, isn't it? I don't know how the best way to begin is, but I want to ask you about the tempo relationship. Do you see any specific connection between lento at the beginning and allegro?
What's the katanas in each shape?
Yeah.
And it's almost like half as tempo.
Is it? I mean, that's the question. That was my question. Are there any clues? Any clues? Let's look. Where are they? Where? Oh, what about here? Play here. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. So, play just the left hand. What's maybe you should start here, though. Isn't that the same? So is he telling us that it's the same? You know, it's an interesting question. And are there any other pieces like that? I don't know if you play any of those pieces, but yes, what? Like what?
Where the tempo is like mutually stated.
Well, or where there's an introduction or a slow tempo at the beginning, which is followed by a faster tempo where it might be a 1-to-2 proportion. I can think of 3 or 4. I don't know, anybody? What? Mahler's symphonies. I was just a poor pianist thinking of piano music, but what about Opus 111? Is that an example? Liszt would have known that piece, right? Beethoven doesn't tell us, but if you think about the way 111 is, at the end of the grave, there's this kind of quasi-trill in the left hand, which looks like 16th notes, right? And then suddenly the bar line comes, and now it's fast tempo, and those same 2 notes look like 8th notes. Are they meant to be the same? Some people think so, some people think not. What about the Pathetique Sonata? Is it a 1-to-2 proportion? What about Chopin's Second Sonata, where he tells you, most people don't do it, I think, but doppio movimento, double. So, or what about the French Overture? French Overture is a really interesting case, because I think Bach sort of does tell you, but it's like a puzzle to figure it out. So I think it is convincing, actually. And then if that's true, so if this is really the same pulse, then what's happened there? So we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Right? So in fact, when it turns into allegro, this still makes sense, I think. So I thought it was too slow. I mean, that's a fancy way of saying it. And then the other thing is, other places I like the tempo a lot. Like here, is it 58? Play a little bit. But can you, yeah, just someplace around here, just some of this. It's sort of a thing, but I don't see it. I mean, it's certainly not written that way. So I don't know how beautifully Mr. Sokolov does that, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I think it's not honoring the scope of the piece. And you know, what I was talking about at the beginning of Opus 110 is even more true here, which is that in the way these opening measures are performed, it should give us a sense that this is a huge piece. It's a huge canvas. And if instead we miniaturize the phrases and sort of think only about the moment then it doesn't feel like it's necessary to be 30 minutes, right? I need it to feel like it has to be that much. So I think all these are just leading here. This wasn't really the same tempo either, by the way, so again, your tempo over here I thought was good. Wait, I'm in the wrong place. Here, but then I think it should be the same here too. So do this one once again, just to color. So, am I being a little pedantic? Maybe. But I think that a greater unity of tempo in this is really useful. And you can deviate from it, but I think you should at least absorb what it would be like to really play with a coherent tempo, because I think that's the way it functions the best. So if there really is a pulse at the beginning, and we feel, I know the piano was malfunctioning there, so you couldn't do that the way you want, but ba, 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 it's still a syncopation. Where does the little crescendo point to? Bar 2 and 3?
The D natural.
Does it? I don't think so, really.
Well, naturally, I feel like that's the D flat.
No, but what does it look like?
Oh.
That's pretty well printed, by the way. This is the New Henley. You can go look at the manuscript. It's in New York City in the Morgan Library. I think they'll let you look at it. No, they probably won't, but they'll let you see a picture of it. It's published too. You can go get it. Well, sorry. Yeah, what's it pointing at? It's not pointing to either the E flat or the D. It's pointing in between. Right? So what does that mean? How do you do that on the piano? I mean, it's right somehow. Yada, yada, da, da. He's showing you that that's the expression, isn't it? That it's the conflict of those, right? I think that's what it's about. So I would be careful about playing. Don't do that. A lot of people now, musicologists, people who study this, are of the belief that these, what we call in English, hairpins, might also be about time. And I think it's pretty convincing. The big article on this is by David Kim. You go read it in 19th Century Music. He focuses on drums, and he analyzed a bunch of recordings made by students of people who had worked with Brahms. And he found, these are recordings made in the 1920s mostly, but he found that when there's a hairpin, they get slower. So is it possible that in a lot of 19th century music, we should understand it as not just a dynamic change, but also a kind of rubato indication? It's pretty convincing, in certain pieces of Chopin, and maybe here. But very often in modern performances, or I should say performances of our time, we hear ya-dee-da-dee-da. Right? It gets slower. Because I think our tendency in classical music performance these days is that as sounds become softer, we get slower. But basically, if it's to be believed that these hairpins mean something about time, then it's telling us the opposite thing. That is, when the sound is getting softer, it should be quicker. And, it's an interesting subject. Why is that? It goes back to what I was saying about thinness of the instrument. So, if you have a very thin-toned, not very well-sustained sound coming out of your piano, then when you play softer, you're probably going to go faster because the notes won't connect. On our piano, we can go as slow as we want. We still hear a connection. But I think it's actually very convincing to imagine that it could be a little thinner and quicker. And by the way, not in lists, I think, but in descriptions of Chopin's playing, there are accounts, contemporary accounts. Mercure de France, I think, and I can't remember what year it is, it actually says that when he played softer, he got faster, which is, I think, contrary to our idea. We play one more time. So see if I can feel the interval, and don't get slower at the end of bar 3. I think you should start at the beginning. I know that note is messed up. Yeah, sorry. Slower. those are all the same thing, right? So I think that should make sense, whatever you decide the tempo relation is, but somehow that makes sense. It's not a sudden change. It's also not louder. Right? Bum, bum, ba-da. It just started to get louder, but that's not working. What else do I want to talk to you about? I want to ask you over here. So this is a great passage. What's the design of this? What do you want us to hear? I'm looking around 32, by the way. You can look at this.
I think this is the first time where the Allegro energetical tempo is like clear.
Okay.
Because here it's kind of broken by the rest.
Oh, well, that's true. I hear from you, yan da 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 dee, da 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 da, like right hand, left hand. But what happens to the right hand? Ya da da dee dee dee. I think that's still there. And what about the left hand? So before I get to da 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 dee 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 dee, I get dee dee da 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 dee da. Can you play that alone once, just the left? So I hear dee 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 da 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 da. So I really want all of it, right? And I have to say, I mean, you can think about whether this is true or not. I think that in any kind of polyphonic texture, it's usually better to hear everything. So when we hear people bringing out a voice, is it the best choice? So, I mean, yeah, it could be cool. Sometimes people do it in an unusual way, but mostly I want to hear everything. And I think that, especially in music like this, I mean, the complexity is interesting. And if you simplify it, as people do, I mean, you hear this all the time, da-dee, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, I think you haven't really given us the piece, because I think it's more than that. And it continues like that, right? He's complexifying it rather than simplifying it. One little thing about this basic passage, I guess it's more obvious over here. So is there some way to touch the pedal a little bit so these would be not so dry? Da-da. So I think it's true there's a hairpin. Yeah, yeah, but I don't think it's an accent. So I think if you end up hearing ee-ta, I don't think it's good. I mean, I know people do it, but I don't think so. It's still, again, it's very fast. I'm going to try to slow. Tia, tia. So it's more like an expression than it is like a virtuosity thing. Play by itself once, you just like tia. Still sounds like an accent. So you need the pedal even before that note, right? Right, and it applies to the low one too. So that the shapes are different. Every time. Better. So even when the pitch is rising, but it's still weak, strong, weak. But I think you could do that. I mean, I think it can make more sense. Because it isn't, yeah, it's a virtuoso passage, but really, it's the conflict of those two elements that's what's happening in the music. Is it always true that the most difficult notes are the least important? It's a strange thing, but you know, I think in practicing as pianists playing difficult music, of course, we spend a lot of time practicing very fast notes, difficult passages, but so often in the actual musical organization, those notes turn out to be the least important thing, or at least not the main thing. And yet in our minds, because we spend so much time practicing, we focus on that. It's like, oh, I missed that note. Oh, I gotta get that note. And it's like, but really, what about the bigger picture, the bigger sound, maybe I should say. What about this? I wondered here, we already talked about this, so this might be the first theme. There's only an accent on the highest note. Tum ta da dee da dee da. Don't put accents in the middle. T, you need more of that. It's hard, of course, but often the note at the end, because you have to leap again. So I hear da da dee da dee da. And even though it's not louder, but I hear the energy in the leap. So in fact, I need to finish the sound and then move my hand. So da da dee da dee da. Move as fast as you want to, but not while you're playing the note, right? The note has to be done before you move. And there are other things you know this, of course, but some of these have accents, but mostly they don't. I wondered about this magnificent place, the Grandioso. What do you think about the chords? I thought it was pretty good, but what are you thinking? What do you want, or what is it? What's it doing?
I mean, the chord itself aren't like anything that complex.
No.
Special.
No.
I think it's more.
How loud can you play but without accents? So don't play the melody, just play the bass and the chord.
I guess loudly as possible.
Yeah, but without accents. So how could that be? Right? Like my hand, it's heavy if I can, but not very stiff, not very rigid. Wah, 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 wah. Because I really want the thing to vibrate. I want the piano to vibrate. You really feature the right hand, but what if we heard a little more equality, I think? Because I was speaking about this in Opus 110, but what's happening here? Right, we hear this, and meanwhile these guys, right? What's happening? That note vibrating. So if I play without too much accent here, I'm doing what you can't do. I'm making the note long, louder after the attack. So that's what happens if you're getting it to work. But if you play with too much accents in the lower part, then I just don't notice that this is ringing. So I think, yeah, it's fortissimo and eventually fortissimo, but still the chords, the melody chords, are being reinforced by all these repeated notes. Personally, I would try not to play too equally in rhythm. I think if you really play in a very modern style, da 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 da, that maybe that doesn't really help the vibration either. So, you know what? Maybe ya da 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 da, something, a little bit of humanity in the rhythm, so that it's not just so equal. And partly that has to do with what happens in the longest note, right? So instead of slowing down at the end of the long melody notes, you might want to go faster. So, you know, you do that when you're accompanying a singer, right? She's singing, ta-dee, and she's running out of air, and what do? You rush a little bit, and hopefully nobody really notices. But here too, tee-da-dee, so, ya, ba, 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 ba. I don't think they have to be ba, 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 ba. If you play it out to the end very equally, that note will be gone. So, easy for me to say all this, but I think that you can think about the sound that's happening in the overall resonance, and it could be even more grandioso. Don't lose the tempo, right? So this was a good tempo, ya-dee, but then I think it's the same. Can you just play from there once? And again, that's very dramatic, but the emphasis really is ta-dee-da. So you don't want to make an equal sound for the hair. Play without any eighth notes once, can you see? Just leave out all the eighth notes. Play da, ta, ta, ta. So that should make sense, right? That should make sense. All that should make sense. And then isn't this the same tempo? So ya, dum, da, ti. hear people do crazy things, but I think it should be connected anyway, even if it's not exactly the same. I want to ask about, it is this phrase, isn't it? So play here. See if this can actually be one group. I don't know, have you guys thought about that? So, one of the innovations of 19th century piano music is that you can have a repeated pitch under a slur. So Mozart never wrote that, ever. Beethoven does, occasionally, very rare. But why couldn't Mozart do it? So he couldn't do that. But we can. Because we have a double escapement, right? The piano now, the modern piano, as it started to exist at the beginning of the 19th century, you could play the key again without totally releasing the sound, right? As I can. Right. So you should practice this. And if instead you play with your finger, even if the pedal is down, it's a different sound. And it's akin to what happens when singers have a vowel. Ya, yi, wa, ra, right? Instead of ta, ta. So, ya, ya, ya. It's all vowels. And then ya, that feels like a new accent to me. Right, that needs to be not too soft. Yeah, I feel like there's a accent. So how do you play without accent? Yeah. But these, you play from the ear. On the key. Yeah, because I hear. Better. So all accents gone. Also, I don't know what it means, but why does he put a quarter note stem on that? There's a quarter note on this note where the turn is. Is that what it is? I would suggest that is what it is, so try to stay in the F. You can't really do it, but imagine if it was, or if that's what you want, but now you have to do it on one finger. That was pretty good. So I don't like going on right away either. You can, but I wish you waited a little. I think if you play ya, di, da, 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 it feels a little stiff. And do you really mean that? Ya, da, ti, da, da. I don't think so. Ya. That was good. Yeah, also, ti, da, da. Because where are we really going? Ya, da, da. That chord. Yeah, right. So that's a funny question, isn't it? So I say, my artistic feeling is I really want to emphasize this other note. I like this note, and I want to play this softer. Why can't I do that? Why can't I do that? But because there's so much tension in this chord, right? So I think if I could really find the underlying, I'm going to call it, what am I going to call it? I was going to say meaning, but I'm not going to say meaning. The underlying signification in the intensity of that harmony, then I really don't like emphasizing that note so much anymore, right? Because the real interesting thing was that, that crazy chord that he's building. We're almost done, I promise. I want to ask you one more little tiny detail, but it might be interesting for other people. And that's this melody. So play a little bit here so they know where we are. This is 161, I think. That was better this time. And that's an interesting case. So speaking of sarabans, right, it goes to the second beat, right? Even though it's a lower pitch, but it's for sure not T, but T. Then what about that? Ta, and then there's an arpeggio. And I thought the first time you did it, I felt like I didn't get a connection to the next note. How do you do that, actually? There you go. So you want to actually hold it, right? Until you get, right? Just let us hear this. I think otherwise we get a gap. ya-da-da-da, right? But it's better not to. Singers never do that. Ya-da-da-da. Last thing I was going to ask you about was the organization of rhythm here. So, like in this passage, we didn't get there. This passage, what do you do? Is that the first one? Yeah. Play a little bit right here so they know where it is. 153. So where do you think it's going? I got so wow. But there, right? Copy, right? So no crescendo yet. So it starts after the third note. Ya da 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 dee da da dee. And you could say, well, that's awfully picky. Why are you following that? But I think that's because it corresponds to the harmony, right? Because I don't really feel any change until after that. That's what motivates the crescendo. Do one more time. Here is. Yes, it's better. And then apropos singers, so here's my long note. Ya, I'm gonna run out of air. I think you can play these notes much less lighter and also faster. Too loud, because I still want to hear ta. Do it one more time. Let's break it. So you don't have to do that, but I think it's worth practicing it. And then even if you go back to a more stable tempo, you still have the sense of that. And I think that is what happens when you accompany singers, right? That you have to respond to whether the note is still present or not. And it has something to do with how loud it is on the piano, right? Because if I play it kind of too soft to begin with, then you really have to go faster. So you just have to accompany yourself as you're doing it and hear what makes sense with the overall. Maybe we should stop. I feel like we hardly started, but it's that kind of piece, you know? Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for playing.
More importantly, thank you.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I know we're very late. I would take questions.